Hello, welcome to this video tutorial. So this one is overviewing the 10 marker from the 2017 AS paper. It's on the AS paper where you will have a 10 mark for education, where it's asking you to outline and explain. The outline and explain is not on the full A-level paper, so if you are from a college or a centre that is doing only the full A-level, don't follow this paper. This is if you are doing the AS at the end of the first year. Okay, so basically a 10 marker. So a 10 marker, there is 10 marks available. This one is asking you to outline and explain two things. As it's out of 10 marks, they recommend that you spend a minute and a half per mark, which gives you about 15 minutes to answer this question. And as an examiner, they are looking for two solid paragraphs, equal size, both of them, where you are linking two parts of the specification together. They will give you the connectives in the answer in the question, and they will be the connectives that will prompt you to link them together. So what I say to my students is identify the connective part A and identify the connective part B, and make sure that in both your paragraphs you have part A and part B. Now when students are practicing this, I get them to colour code them, so the paragraphs should have both colours in them where they refer to both parts of the question, and that will just really visualise that you are answering what the question is asking you to do. So that's just a really handy tip for you to do. So the connective in this one is for an educational policy. So that would be your part A. So you'd start off by outlining, give a bit of an overview of an educational policy, just apply your knowledge, what is it, and then it's asking you to suggest how it has affected the experience of minority ethnic groups. So here you need to be talking about specific ethnic minority groups, so black students, Asian students, Bangladeshi, so on. So make it clear, and you are addressing their experience as well, whether it's a positive experience or a negative experience of the of this policy. Okay. So if we just have a little bit of a look at the examiner comments for this question, students last year found it more challenging. It's requiring you to apply your knowledge of one area of the specification, in this case educational policies, to another area, which is ethnic minorities' experiences of school. So a lot of responses remained in the bottom band due to solely focusing either on the policies or the achievements of ethnic minority groups without linking them together. So a common example of this was a discussion of the ethnocentric curriculum and teacher labelling only in relation to achievements, and they didn't apply it to a specific policy. More commonly, many students were able to identify two policies with some explanation. There was a wide range of policies, and you'll see these on the mark scheme, but Short Start, compensatory education, or policies such as multicultural education or English as an additional language support. And some students were able to link one to the experience of education as another. But don't be mixing up your class or your religion or your gender as a replacement of ethnicity. That will drop your marks down. You've got to be very specific. So in looking at the successful answers, if you want to be getting in the top band, you had two policies, one in each paragraph, and both of these policies were explained explicitly to the experience of a group, such as achievement or self-esteem, or increased opportunities or decreased opportunities in that case. The most popular was national curriculum, that appeared to be ethnocentric, so knowledge could be applied from history, for example, there's a subject, or languages. And you could apply and to explain why they were ethnocentric, and you could then apply some studies of ethnocentric curriculum, studies such as, if I can remember off the top of my head, was something like Ball, I think, was one. Just trying to think off the top of my head. Yeah, Ball was the history. Troyner and Williams looked at language. Bernard Coad also looks at the ethnocentric produces underachievement in black students undermining their self-esteem, so that they could have been used there as well, and that impact of their experience of ethnic minority groups. You're talking about the self-esteem there. So if you have a look at some of the points on the mark scheme, so again, you could have talked about points such as multicultural education was one of them. Now, multicultural education was in the 1980s, 1990s. It was all about raising the self-esteem. You could argue that that black students didn't have low self-esteem, and that there's other factors which could have impacted their experiences of school, such as institutional racism. Assimilation policies were very popular in the 1960s. And an example of an assimilation policy was this English as an additional language programme, and that is further along in the mark scheme there. And you could argue to what extent they are raising the achievement of ethnic minority groups. You can get your analysis by comparing black and Asian students. You could argue that black students, they already speak English, so to what extent does that policy have an impact? And actually you could then bring in the class element and say, well, actually black students speak in a more restricted code because of their class, which actually that could have impacted the experiences of school and not understanding the teacher, rather than the assimilation policy of English as an additional language, from which they don't benefit from. Or you can compare it to Asian students, despite not having English as a first language, typically tend to do well in school anyway, and that Asian students don't necessarily score low on achievement. This next one, the foundation stage profile, was Gilborne's research, and he looked at the assessment game and that it was rigged, and that the rules changed to engineer failure. Basically it was based on, or this policy was based on baseline assessments, which was done originally at the beginning of the school year, but this was replaced with the foundation stage profile, and the result of this change was that overnight black students now appear to be doing worse than white students, and this was because instead of doing it at the beginning of school, the foundation stage profile was done at the end of the first year and was based on teacher recommendations, and so actually it's not the policy, it's actually teacher racism, which is actually labelling students as being less able to achieve. And then you could even start to bring in people like Fuller, that some students might reject these labellings despite this, and so on. There's quite a few policies that you could have gone through, and how you get in your analysis marks is where you are comparing different ethnic groups, and also you can then actually bring in, is it ethnicity or is it the class? And this is why Evans appears on the mark scheme, because Evans, in her research, she argued that to appreciate the relationship between ethnicity and achievement, you need to have to look at gender and class, and that was really, really important there. But there's a range of studies that you could have referred to. So that was Evans. Gilborne and Udall talks about the A to C economy, so I suppose you could talk about the national curriculum having a more negative impact on ethnic minority students because they tend to be streamed lower because of the A to C economy. They're not deemed as being able to pass the likelihood. And then you could actually bring in Mack and Gale and Fuller, who would argue that these students can reject the negative labels, and then you could even analyse it to say, well, actually some students have failed strategies. Sewell looks at boys, so black boys' achievements. So you've got another example there, because you can bring in your boys versus girls as well, especially full as girls do achieve, they seem to be able to reject their labels. Okay, so you've got quite a lot to think about. So just to summarise, make sure that you are picking two policies, and then you are applying it to ethnic minorities, their experiences of school. Add in the analysis to say, well, actually we shouldn't generalise all ethnic minorities, compare them, so Asian, black students, Chinese students, because the outcomes of their achievements is very, very different. And the esteem and the identity of these students are very different as well. So there's your analysis there. And you could also bring in your analysis by comparing the class element of it as well, the middle class versus the working class of these ethnic minority students, and even the gender of the ethnic minority students. Black boys typically do worse than black girls, for example, and that's where you get your analysis from there as well. Okay, thank you for listening. Hopefully it'll give you a little bit of an insight about the type of things that you should be writing about on these answers. Okay, thank you. Goodbye.